Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is a US Today best-selling author. Of course, author of several books, no other than Mr. Chris Philbrook.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm fabulous, fabulous like you, Mr. Chris. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
I have been working as a professional writer since about 2010. I started working in the game development industry, doing a lot of fluff pieces on the website and rule books and stuff like that, and transitioned to more long form writing. Initially, starting writing a story that got posted online that was just kind of a, let's see what happens to it. And this was back in early 2010 and happened to catch an audience online and went from there, got the attention of a couple publishers, and was writing novels and haven't looked back.
Yes. So, Mr. Chris Philbrook, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So, what inspired you to become an author?
I've always been a writer. When I look back at papers that I have kept from early on in my schooling, there was always a penchant for writing stories and creating things and spinning yarns. So in retrospect, I've always been interested in writing and the process of storytelling. Uh, but as far as like trying to go and make it a profession, it never really felt like a realistic goal, because the likelihood of getting published is pretty slim. Even when you're a talented writer, it's not enough. So you still got to be found. So when I started to catch a little bit of success early on, it kind of felt surreal and still does. So I consider myself pretty lucky. And my inspiration for continue going is, now I love what I do. I get to sit around and make up stories all day long, and I get to set my own schedule, and I am my own boss for the most part, and I get to take care of my kids, and it's beautiful. I'm lucky.
Yes, you're lucky, Mr. Chris, because you are a best-selling author. So, let's talk about your latest book. Is this your latest book, Chris Philbrook? Yes?
Yeah, Our Evil Dead.
Are Evil Dead. Can you tell us about it?
Well,
Book 15. So
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
series.
yeah. So this is the 15th book in the Adrian's Undead Diary story, which is the one that kind of got me, into this position. It's a post-apocalyptic story that started back in 2010, and I initially wrote 8 books, and then that was more than enough. And then 4 or 5 years later, the fan base was still clamoring for more, and by then I kind of built up enough interest to write some more. So this is the seventh book since I finished the first 8, making it the 15th book. And it follows the main character, a guy named Adrian Ring, and he has kind of been at the center of the end of the world, at the hands of evil, not just like zombies, but other things. And in this book, the 15th book, he's in Europe, and he has been trying to find some people who will be crucial to the process of kind of surviving this phase of the apocalypse. And in this book, he finds a couple of those people, and the forces that are opposing him sort of ratchet up their response. So fun
What
book.
are your challenges in writing a series like this?
Keeping it organized. There's a certain point where there's so much volume of work and so many names and so many places and so many mentions of who put what where, that it becomes kind of cumbersome to try and keep track of it all. Your continuity starts to get real tough to hold together. And yeah, reasonably organized guy. I've got my spreadsheets. I've got my organization. I have my little web of information and whatnot. But it's a lot.
So speaking of name, how do you name your characters?
Uh, I have a lot of different methods. I don't really stick to any one. I do have a little bit of a habit of trying to pick names that are that have like a background or a meaning that's kind of appropriate to the character that will have that name. And I do that a lot. But in many cases, the name of a character is kind of an homage to someone who I know in real life, or some figure that I want to just kind of like show some support for by naming a character about them, like them, similar to them.
Yes. So let's go to Adrian's and the Diary. Can you
Yeah,
tell us about this?
yeah. So the first book in the series is called Dark Recollections, and there's 8 books in the initial core series. And the first 3 or 4 of those books have all been bestsellers, as we're talking about. And it follows a guy named Adrian Ring, who is in a small town somewhere in America. I don't specify where, and he's in a job he doesn't really care for. He's in a relationship that he doesn't know how he got in and isn't sure how he's going to get out of it. And he's just kind of like doing his thing and isn't happy. And one night, um, zombies start to appear, kind of a traditional sort of zombie apocalypse story. But very quickly, we find out that it's not typical at all. It's much more sinister, it's much more personal. And Adrian discovers that it isn't just about survival in this instance. There's he has tasks that are important for his own survival, as well as the survival of people who are around him. And as the story continues on, he meets more people and learns more about what's going on, and faces greater and more complicated threats. And we start to meet other people in his universe, people who have been kind of confronted with information and realizations that they too are important to whether or not humanity will survive this world-ending threat.
So do you think you can do a prequel of Adrian's and the Diary?
People have asked. There are some characters that show up in the story that have either hinted at or just flat out talked about histories that kind of predate the beginning of the series. And people have asked for those kind of prequels, and it's possible that I could get down to writing them. Also, the main character Adrian, he has a history leading up to the start of the story, and I'm sure people would like to read about some of that. The question is can it hold my interest long enough for me to sit down and actually finish writing it?
Looking forward for that prequel, Mr. Chris. So teaser Dragon Among Us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When Adrian's had kind of taken off, and I was reaching the end of what was book 8,
Yes.
I said, all right, what am I going to do next? And the idea for the Reemergence series, which the book 1 is Tessera, Dragon Among Us, kind of had been in the back of my head for a really, really long time. I think the actual story idea was from probably around 1995 or 2000. Like it's pretty old, and it's about a dragon that wakes up beneath the city of Boston in modern day, and he's been buried beneath the city. And when he awakens, he has no idea how he got there and doesn't understand what's going on, because the last time he was awake, humans were living in mud huts, and we're just learning how to like bang shapes out of rocks. And here he is in a subway. And the story is about him trying to figure out what's going on in the world, and where all of the things that were magical went. And it's a neat series because it kind of examines what would happen if mythical creatures were suddenly there. What would society do? What are the real ramifications of things like that? How would people react? And it's fun. It's a little bit of a whodunit. It's got some like high fantasy Stranger Things vibes as well. And Tesser, the first book here, was the book that hit bestseller on USA Today. So particularly proud of this one.
Yes. Definitely. Congratulations. We're looking forward for more bestseller books. So, how important is outlining before diving into writing the first draft?
50-50. Um, what I've discovered over time, there's the discussion of, are you a plotter or are you a pantser, right? Do you plot your story or do you fly by the seat of your pants? And I'm somewhere in the middle, in the sense that I roughly outline, what the beginning of it looks like. I roughly outline what I think the end of it's going to look like, so I know where I'm going. And then I usually have a handful of scenes or pivotal story moments that I know I want the story to kind of like, bridge to. And I call those my little story islands. And I usually give like a brief 2, 3, 4 sentence, kind of summation of what those points are. And in that sense, that's my important outline, because it gives me a scaffolding, to start, and then to kind of move through and hit all the points. And then as you're actually writing, sometimes you realize like, oh, that idea is trash, and the thing that I'm doing now is better than, what I thought I was going to do. So you kind of pivot, and you adjust your outline, and you come up with something that's more sensible than what you were doing before. But for me, it's important to have that scaffolding, and then I can kind of fill it out as I go.
What techniques can help in developing compelling and believable characters?
Well, every story that has any level of success, the vast majority of the time, people will come back and say that it's about the quality of the character, right? Is the character interesting? Is the character compelling? Is that character, um, somebody that the reader or the listener can connect to? So, number one, first and foremost, you've got to make, a character that fits that bill. And one of the things that I focus really heavily on, when I'm talking about my characters, is, there's two kind of layers to it. And the first one is that the vast majority of my characters are flawed. I don't have any Clark Kent, Superman characters that don't have anything wrong with them, and I don't go so far in the other direction where they're like this, like, you know anti-hero kind of character that's, crawling their way back, towards redemption. But I kind of find the sweet spot in the middle, where they're good, fundamentally good, but they've also made some mistakes. And I think that the average person kind of is that, like, I don't know anybody who hasn't made some mistakes in their life that they regret, whether or not it was, an illegal thing or just a moral thing or a relationship decision or whatever. But I think people connect with my characters, primarily because they're flawed. They're a little messed up. They're genuine. They're not fake. And the other thing that I know that I've had a lot of success with, and this is something that I've worked on hard to kind of like continue to be authentic, is dialogue. Um, I try to write my conversations like really organically. Um, when we talk to each other, like, even, I'm talking to you right now, I'm not too terribly composed, right? Like, I kind of double some words, and I fumble around, and I come back and forth. And when people are really talking to each other, we don't make as much sense as we think we do. And I think when I'm writing, I've developed this kind of natural way to write like that, without, kind of beating people over the head with like syntax and grammar and weird, colloquialisms. So when you're reading a lot of my dialogue, or you're listening to it when it's in audiobook form, it sounds natural, and it sounds like people talking. Whereas opposed to, a lot of, kind of unpolished writers, and people who are working on their craft, it might sound a little stilted. It might sound, kind of forced, or you'll have these like, deus ex machina moments where someone just like happens to say the thing, that's, exactly what the story needs to move forward, which, sometimes you got to do. But trying to write organic dialogue, and especially dialogue from characters who are, flawed like real people, I think that's, crucial.
Definitely. So, Mr. Chris, how do you choose the right setting of your story and why is it important?
um, choosing, put some stuff on a dartboard and throw a dart and see what happens. Um, no, as a guy who has a heavy background in game development, setting is one of the things that's really in the front of my mind when I'm thinking of a story. Um, so the Adrian series, for example, was hugely inspired by an actual physical place that I had spent a lot of time at. And when I was moving around that place in the real world, I was like, wow, this would be a great place for a story like what wound up becoming Adrian's. And Tesser's set in Boston, and I'm intimately familiar with Boston, and it was an easy city to write about because I already know all those streets and I know what those buildings look like and I know what the city smells like. So it's easy for me to write authentically about that place. Um, However, I do write a lot about places I've never been. Um, and, research. You do a lot of research, and I'm lucky enough that I've got a big enough social network that I can usually reach out and find people who have either been to a place or are near that place, and I can talk to them and kind of get some questions answered and kind of make it as authentic as possible. Um, and when I'm choosing those locations, there nothing is random, right? Like I'm not picking spots and saying, all right, let's have that scene take place in Bulgaria just for the hell of it. No, it's I picked that location for a specific reason, and sometimes the specific reason is winds up being obvious in the story, and sometimes it's for a reason that never seems to make any sense, but it did to me. And maybe in a later book, if there's a series, it'll become more apparent. But like I said, nothing's an accident.
So, how do you decide on narrative point of view and what impact does have on the story?
Um, I think I choose based on how much of the main character or main characters, I should say, how much I want their internal thought process to be part of the book. Um, so you go with a more first person perspective where you're seeing the story through their eyes and you're kind of like inside their head as they experience the events. And if I think the story benefits from having those moments of observation where people are thinking and you have that kind of eye over your shoulder, then I'll go with a more first person perspective. Um, that being said, there are more cinematic options, more that kind of omniscient. The reader sees things that the characters don't. Third person point of views. And I think those are you see those more in like fantasy and science fiction and stuff like that. Uh, so you kind of pick based on I kind of pick based on how much I want the readers to be inside characters' heads, and will that benefit the story?
So, what strategy that that help you to overcoming writer's block during the book writing process?
Oh yeah, that's a tough one sometimes. I was blessed with the neurodivergent feat of ADHD, and I wasn't diagnosed until much later in my adult life. And I have developed some pretty significant coping skills to keep organized and to combat my hyperfixations and my, kind of the issues of ADHD that I've struggled with. And one of the things that it has benefited me greatly is in my writing. I usually have 2 or 3 projects going at any given time. And part of that is the ADHD. I have to have everything, all my plates have to be spinning at the same time because that's what my brain likes. But what happens is I by having a few things going on at the same time, I can follow that muse to whatever thing that's working. So when I'm stumbling on a story and I hit a dead end, rather than sit there smashing my head against the wall saying, "Oh, I got to figure this out. I have to figure this out," I just say, "All right, park it, move on to one of the other projects that I have up in the air, and continue to be productive in some way." And yeah, it might not be the thing I want to finish first, but if I sit there trying to work on the thing I'm stuck on, I get angry, I get frustrated, I wind up settling on something just to move past the problem, and that's never ever good for the story, right? Like you don't want to settle on something, you want to like really enjoy it and feel good about what you're writing. So I combat writer's block by having things to move on to that I'm not blocked on. And eventually, whatever was causing me to be stopped up on the first thing always winds up resolving over time. I'll be in the shower 2 weeks later and be like, oh, I need to have that guy say that instead. And then I go to work the next day and I change it, and the block is gone, and I'm back to being productive.
Definitely. So, what strategies that you implement to stay motivated and productive?
Desperation. This is my full-time gig. I am a writer, and 100% of my income comes from the books that I write and the work that I do in the publishing industry. So, this is my job. So, the easy answer to that is I am motivated because I like to have things. I like to be able to eat. I like to be able to feed my kids. I like, having a house. Um, but that's like the business answer to it. The reality of like the creative end of it, and what keeps me motivated is I like telling stories. I just like making up settings, and I love the whole process of like engineering imaginary worlds and imaginary scenarios that people can get invested in. And I love sharing it because it's really cool to see what people think and how they react to it. And now that I'm at this point in my career, when I put my ideas out there for people to kind of riff on and get back to me on it, it's great to get that like feedback, that real time, hey, that sounds like a great idea, or hey, yeah, I don't know, maybe not. So I'm motivated because it's exciting to have that process. um, getting that idea out in a way that it can be digested, and then having people kind of come back and tell me they like it or they don't like it. And another part of that staying motivated is you kind of grow a thicker skin on feedback, right? I couldn't
Yes.
even tell you how many bad reviews I have. It's up into the hundreds, thousands probably by now, across all my titles. But overwhelmingly they're positive. So it used to be tough to see those bad reviews, but now I just don't care. Like, I understand that I'm not writing for everybody, and
Yes.
even though I love a book, someone's not going to like it no matter what I do.
Yes. You cannot please everybody, as they said. So,
Sure.
Mr. Chris, what would be your advice for those aspiring writers out there?
Oh, the default thing that people ask with that question, or the thing that I say when they ask that question, is write the book. Write the book. Even if it's hard, if you want to write it, stick with it. If that brings you joy, and once you've written the book, you have the material to then create a book, right? So it's kind of like the difference between harvesting materials and actually building something with those materials, right? Until you've written the book, right, all you're doing is harvesting materials. You're putting words on paper that you will eventually then turn into a tight, coherent story. Once you have all those words, you can then go back into it and make it shine. You can edit it, you can punch it up, you can tighten it together, you can move stuff around, and that's when you really, really, really make a book. But you can't do that until you write it. So the biggest thing is getting to that point where you have the words that you can then kind of mold into the book you want to put out in the world.
What is your short term and long term goals in writing?
Well, long term's easy, and that's keep doing this for as long as I can. Um, and then specifically, I have more ideas than I know what to do with, and I keep getting more new ideas. So long term, it would be great to see some of the ideas that I'm more passionate about, become projects that I work on. Short term goals right now, for 2025, I want to kind of come back to the point of production where I feel like I'm doing good about it. We've had a lot going on personally the last couple of years, and my writing production has kind of dipped to just kind of handle real life stuff, which is fine. But short term, I want to kind of try and push myself to get back on the production level that I know I like, and I know my readers and listeners like. And I said I was working on a shared world novel. I want to get that out. I also need to wrap up my Darkness of Diggory Finch series. There's one more book in that series, uh, which will be the fourth book. And I also want to wrap up the Adrian series. That's got probably one more book after book 15, which is coming out right now. And then once those three things are done, I'm kind of free to do whatever I want. And that is equally terrifying and exciting.
So exciting, Mr. Chris, and good luck for your goals and looking forward for best-selling or award-winning piece to come. So to sum up our discussion, how do you balance between being original and appealing to genre expectations?
Everything's already been done, right? Like every story has already been told. And when you want to write a story, it's almost inevitable that you're going to step on, work that's already been put out in that genre. So the trick is if you can't avoid doing stuff that other people have done, then you've got to do it either better than it's been done or different enough in your own voice that even though it's already been done, it's different and original enough and interesting. So, I kind of combat that by accepting that there are certain things in stories and certain genres that every reader or listener wants to read. That's a part of that genre and they expect to read it. So, okay, if that's what they all expect, then let's make sure it shows up. But then the second part of that is doing it in a way that's authentic to what makes me enjoy writing. Putting the parts of writing in that appeal to me and making it my own and putting it in my voice. Tropes are
Definitely.
popular for a reason.
Yes, for sure. So, Mr. Chris Philbrook, thank you so much again for entertaining us. Thank you so much for giving us empowering books. And we are looking for more books to come.
Thank
So,
you.
Mr. Chris, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Oh, please. Everything that I've written shows up on all of the major retailers. And if you want to just come to the horse's mouth, my home website is thechrisphilbrook.com. And everything is kind of branched off of that. So come say hi.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Chris Philbrook because if you support him, as I said, more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Chris, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, Mr. Chris, we will be